Um, I, I think the only risk to that is that it may create a confidence issue between you and the parent. Um, if you and this is this is also true with kids with functional abdominal pain. When you, well, let's try this and see if this helps. You know, it doesn't work very well when you do that. So what you have to do, I think, is have a fair amount of confidence that you know what this is, and then go with the treatment that you feel is most appropriate, because there's always some placebo effect in whatever you do, and your level of confidence is going to help sell that placebo effect. And likewise, if you say, well, let's try this formula, there's a pretty good chance that'll fix it, and if it doesn't, then the next thing that you try to do, the parents may be somewhat less confident in your ability to solve the problem. So from a purely medical standpoint, it doesn't hurt the baby. I think there's a little risk in doing a 2-week trial to see, but I think what you have to do is pose it very carefully in terms of a diagnostic challenge, that your child exhibits some features of this and some features of this, and the only way to really know is to do this for 2 weeks and don't anticipate any benefit for the first week, and then during the second week you'll start to see some clinical improvement, and if we see that, then we know what's going on here. Of course, the colicky baby may get better anyway, but it doesn't matter, you solved the problem. So I guess one other potential is if you get into the situation where the baby outgrows the colic and it was never the formula to begin with, then the family's going to incur some ongoing expense related to what you did, but from a practical standpoint, I think that the risk is nil. Do you have it?
Yeah, I see, when you're sitting in clinic and you don't know, I think it's really important when you don't know. You do an elimination diet and see, but I think the key element is the re-challenge, and that's really hard to do for some mums. They will not let you do it. They just will not let you re-challenge because their baby's better. But those are the ones you have to push. And I think countries like the Netherlands and other ones that insist on re-challenging to reimburse you are really sensible, and I am really keen on that re-challenge. I also do think there's some harm if you're using an amino acid formula and you settle down, and this is a behavior that's gone on a lot in the countries, especially certain countries like the Chinese policy of using amino acids, and then they get stuck on that amino acid. I think you've heard about tolerance acquisition. I think they run into trouble, and that's the concern that I have in the background.
Well, following with these really practical questions, but that happens every day, there are a few of them related to treatment, and starting for partial hydrolyzed formula can be used for cow's milk protein allergy. The other is related on what we should do when the baby has breastfeeding allergy. And the last one is related to casein and whey, if there is any difference in terms of treatment or if there is any special considerations that need to be taken into account before the recommendation. Then I leave these 3 questions because I thought that better just one-to-one, because maybe one is related to the other.
Regarding the first question, it's a very common situation in Italian practice. 40% of the Italian mothers are used to change the formulas in the first 2 months of life because functional gastrointestinal disorders such as infant colic or gastroesophageal reflux. And the vast majority of the cases, they change many formulas, but at the end of the day, they continue the same diet. But sometimes, as Neil and John said, there are cow milk allergy behind this kind of signs and symptoms. So in this case, it's mandatory not to start with a partial hydrolyzed formula because partial hydrolyzed formula are helpful just to prevent, not to treat cow milk allergy. But in vast majority of cases, I continue to observe doctors prescribing partial hydrolyzed formula to treat a possible case of a cow milk allergy. And regarding the duration, I repeat, it's better to explain to the mother, let's try an elimination diet for just a couple of weeks, then be back to the office to see what's happened to the signs and symptoms. It's important to explain to the mother which are the signs and symptoms that are to be modified by this nutritional intervention. For example, body growth, for example, the stool pattern, so for example, the duration of crying, because the family should understand which are the target. And regarding the differences, comparing externalized casein and whey formula, we are learning more and more regarding the difference in terms of the peptides action. This is, also in this case, we are opening a new scenario considering the different activity of these peptides. And only the peptides deriving from casein hydrolysis are able to modulate efficiently the immune system and the gut barrier. But other peptide sources from soy, whey, or rice are unable to modify the gut barrier function and the immune tolerance mechanism. So in the next future, we need to learn more and more about these fantastic peptides. We aim to increase, for example, the abundance of these peptides in the new generation of formulas.
No?
Well, I have a follow-up question about partially hydrolyzed formula, perhaps for John first, but maybe for everyone. So we've seen very clearly, because of the mechanisms of action of immune-related effects, that if you have a true allergy to cow milk protein, then a partially hydrolyzed formula is not indicated. However, is there a role for partially hydrolyzed protein formulas in fussy children who are not allergic, and if so, what might that mechanism be?
That's a real good question, and I'm not sure I can give you an answer to that. I can just tell you what I think, and then I'd be real interested to know what the two experts on either side of me think, because they know more about this than I do. But when you partially hydrolyze a formula, what you do is you break the conformational epitopes. In other words, a protein molecule is a big glob of stuff. And when you toss some enzymes into into milk, which is how you make these things, and just leave it there for a short time, it breaks these bonds that hold this protein together in a glob so that it sort of stretches out. So there are some places where the immune system reacts to a couple of amino acids that are close together, and then you break that apart, and the antibodies can no longer attach there. But you break open new sites, so you can be allergic to things that are different that the antibodies couldn't get at to begin with. I hope that explanation kind of makes sense. So in essence, what you've done is you haven't created a hypoallergenic protein, you've created a different protein with different sites to react to. So it's very much like what would happen if you gave a soy formula. It's a different protein, and it'll take the baby a while, but he will relearn to react to that protein. Whereas an extensively hydrolyzed formula or an amino acid formula, basically you can't react to it because there are no sites there. So I think that these formulas are not really gentler on the immune system, or they're not really easier to absorb. Protein is very well absorbed and digested. That's not an issue. I think the reason they work is because in some of these kids with mild allergic disease, you're basically showing the immune system a different protein, and you can get by with it just like you can get by with a soy protein or something in a small number of kids. I think that's what's going on here, but I'd be real interested to hear what the real experts say.
I don't disagree with that view. I think when you look at partially hydrolyzed formulas and you're treating digestive issues, low-grade immaturity of the gut or low-grade allergy, whichever, I don't know which one it is, but even low-grade non-IG mediated allergies, I think you do end up treating it. The misconception that is really important in partially hydrolyzed formulas is what all the position statements around the world, whether you're American or Espigan or everything else, is that these are for long-term prevention of disease. That's not true. Okay, and this is the position I would take. I think partially hydrolyzed formulas, these children who have more GI symptoms than others, treating a low-grade allergy, I agree with. I don't have a problem with that. Where I have a problem with where people are turning around and saying, oh, it's to treat, even the Gini study, all really Gini has shown is a reduction in a mild bit of skin disease, and I don't think the 20-year Gini study is going to show anything at all. So I'm not convinced where someone is standing up and saying, this is to prevent long-term allergic disease. There is a single piece of evidence for that, and the AAP this year have reversed their position. It was the only statement they reversed was that actually we should not be using partially hydrolyzed formulas. That's the misnomer. And I've seen people make statements that babies with C-section should have PPI. Where? There's not a single piece of evidence. So that's what upsets me. I think they have a place in that low-grade allergic child and a distressed child and settling, but they have no place where the misconception is that they're in long-term allergic disease. So I think we have to be very strict about what we're using it for and what our long-term indications